Here's another way I think we could a way I think we can sum up Elihu deciding to speak. I wasn't going to say anything, but anytime somebody says that in a meeting or in a class, anytime somebody says that, you know you're in for a long speech. You know, whoever it says such a line, it's been building up within them to try to say something. And now it's coming out. It's time for them to speak. It's time for them to get this off their shoulders. We do have some art that's not from William Blake, yay, or from Brick Testament. This is from a 9th century codex, and I pulled it from a digital version of a commentary I have. So this is actually in a monastery in Patmos, where the book of Revelation is said to be written. And this is Job and Elihu talking there. You can see Elihu kind of dressed nicely, speaking to Job, sitting on the ash heap still. So yeah, I want to turn this over now to Richard, who's going to kind of walk us through these chapters.
Yeah, we're going to look at Elihu's speech in a little bit of detail. By the way, our Footsteps of Faith class goes to the monastery of Patmos, so you'll have to look for this particular mosaic. I think that's neat. Just want to remind you of something I said back about when was the book of Job written. Perhaps it was written by multiple hands, put together by a later author. G.K. Chesterton said that a monastery is certainly built by various hands over a long period of time, but it still has architectural integrity and unity. So there's part of me that wants to say, even if Elihu's speech is a later assertion, nonetheless, it's still worthwhile to think, how is this fitting into the overall unity or coherence of the whole book of Job? And that's what we're going to try to do. Jim wants to say, I think, is an interesting take on friendship. I'm going to give you a slightly different take, and then we really do want to hear from you, if you have ideas how to make it. But if you turn to page 2, we're going to look at his speech in some detail, but at least I'll throw my thesis out there. And some of you who know music better than I do can help me. We talk about reprising or resounding a song, where you introduce a theme early in a concert and then pick it up later, often in a more powerful and deeper way. I'm getting a few nods, thank you. In a way, that's what I want to say happens with Elihu. He picks up and reprises some of the themes from both the friends' speeches and Job's response to the friends. One of the neat things about that mosaic that you can see is Elihu does kind of offer the hand of friendship to Job. He says at one point, look, I'm made of clay like you're made of clay. So you can listen to me. And he tries to say, I understand your arguments. Here they are. This is what you're saying. And so there is some gesture of solidarity there, at least at the beginning. So he listens to Job, listens to Job's friends, tries to reprise, resound them. But I also want to say he points forward as well to God's speech from the whirlwind, especially at the end of Elihu's speech, chapters 36 and 37. He sounds a whole lot like God from the whirlwind. He really does. And I want to think about that. In a way, he's setting us up to hear that. So then the question becomes, how does this reprising, resounding work? And I'm going to try to say it works by tinny and tiny contrast. That Elihu's speech is to God's speech like a ripple is to a tidal wave, a candle is to the sun, lightning bug is to lightning, and a belch is to thunder. Now you think I'm being a little silly with belching, but one of the things that Elihu says is, this speech is just fermenting in me, and I have to let it out. I have to find some relief. And so this has led some commentators to various jokes about, you can go with those jokes, about, yes, belching and otherwise, and maybe that's what Elihu's speech is. But it does seem to me that that belch, if you will, of Elihu again gets answered by thunder of God from the whirlwind. Or maybe the light that Elihu can shed, which is a candle, gets answered by the sun. I've got one of my favorite Mark Twain quotes there. The difference between the right word and almost the right word is not that great. Only the difference between lightning and a lightning bug. there is a difference in the way the right word can illuminate. And in God is the one who, I'm going to argue, brings the right word. We can come back to that. But before you think I'm being too harsh on our guy with his Nordstrom jeans, or whatever they are, think about a famous story about Karl Barth, the great Swiss theologian, 20th century, voluminous, wrote all kinds of theological books, fills up 3 or 4 of your shelves, right? He tells the story on himself that he had a dream. And in the dream, he was in heaven, just arrived, and he was trailing behind him a great big wagon with all of his books. And from the walls in heaven, he hadn't met anybody yet, he heard this laughter sounding over the walls. So couldn't understand why the laughter and where everybody was. Finally, somebody comes out to meet him and says, Carl, welcome. And he says, can you tell me why everybody is laughing? And the person begins to laugh himself, and he says, Carl, they're laughing at you because you think those are needed here. They are lightning bugs, the works of Karl Barth, compared to the lightning that we will see when we see God face to face, or a candle compared to the sun. There's the other great story, similar. Thomas Aquinas, another voluminous, profound theologian, had a vision of God before his death. And he called his secretary in after the vision and said, I want you to get all my manuscripts. Now remember, his manuscripts are still pretty rare. And both he and his secretary have been working on them for decades. And he says, I want you to get all my manuscripts, and I want you to burn them, because they are straw compared to what I have just seen. Now, fortunately, his secretary didn't burn them, disobeyed his master's deathbed instructions. So it may not be insulting Elihu to say he's just a lightning bug, or just a candle, or just a belch compared to God. But I do think he sounds some of God's themes, and in a way sets us up so that God can reprise them with lightning and thunder. So let's see if you agree.
Hey, Richard,
Yeah,
can I jump in real quick?
Sure.
I think what Richard says is really fascinating because, and actually very innovative in the scholarly work on the book of Job, because a lot of people, when talking about the whirlwind, see Elihu as the ultimate spoiler alert, because Elihu kind of gives away some things that that God will reveal from the whirlwind. So I think Richard trying to see that in a more positive light as setting the stage rather than spoiling what God will say is very interesting. If we think back to the dramatic illustration, think of God kind of. Remember, we're prepared for God to come confront Job. God's walking out, getting ready to go on stage, and Elihu pushes him aside and says, wait a second, just a second.
That's good, yeah. And God seems to have the patience to let him to do that for some reason. Yeah, that's nice, thank you. Let's try a little bit to get into the speech so you can see it. One of the puzzles of the Elihu speech is there is a brief introduction. Remember I said the narrator only says so-and-so spoke and doesn't tell us anything about so-and-so. But Elihu we get a little bit, and what we get from the narrator is an emphasis on his anger. And I've highlighted there. Other translations actually call him not only angry, but burning with anger. But can you see, in the space of, 5 verses, then Elihu, end of verse 1, became angry. He was angry with Job because he, Job, justified himself rather than God. He was angry also at Job's 3 friends because they found no answer. Now, Elihu had wanted to speak to Job had waited to speak to Job because they were older than he. But when Elihu saw that there was no answer in the mouths of these 3 men, he became angry. So one question I want you to think about is, why is the narrator telling us this? How does this introduction that Elihu is angry help us to understand his speech? Because Elihu does not self-present as angry. He may be angry, but this is how he introduces himself. I am young in years and you are aged. Therefore I was timid and afraid to declare my opinion to you. But truly it is the Spirit and immortal, the breath of the Almighty, that makes for understanding. I will also give my answer. I will also declare my opinion, for I am full of words. The Spirit within me constrains me. My heart is indeed like wine that has no vent. Like new wineskins, it is ready to burst. I must speak so that I may find relief. I must open my lips and answer. Not only is he just busting out to talk, but he also claims divine inspiration. at a couple, 3 times through his speech. And I got a dumb question into simplicity, but I don't think it's so dumb in its implications. Is that true? Is he divinely inspired? And see, that's one of the questions I think that Long's humor kind of obscures. The guy claims to be divinely inspired. Is he? Or is he deluded? Or lying? And you can tell I'm trying to save some sense of his divine inspiration by saying he's like lightning bug to the lightning. Right? He has something to say that has some measure of truth. It's just tinny and tiny compared to what is about to come. But I got this because I looked at Jim's suggestion. I looked at John Calvin's sermons on Job. And Calvin takes this idea of inspiration seriously. And he talks about Elihu's righteous indignation. And I thought, that's an interesting way of taking it. A slightly more positive view of Elihu. So just keep that question. Angry, divinely inspired, both. Okay, now go to chapter 33.
Oh, wait, one
Go,
second.
yeah, please.
We're going to kind of track these
yeah.
chapters with the Brick Testament. They really like this verse from 32 about the wine and new wineskin ready to burst. I think this is what a Lake Fellow is like if Lewis doesn't let us preach enough. We have to speak. we have to use the words that God has given us. If we don't get to, we're going to burst.
Yeah, and they've got the anger on his face there.
Yeah,
too.
he looks angry, and he does look a little more hip next to the guy. I'm pretty sure is just using the clothes of a Star Wars series for.
He does have Nordstrom blue jeans. And remember, this is Job down here on the ash heap with all of his skin wounds and festering. Okay, good. Let's go on and look at chapter 33 real quick. We're going to have to move through these with some speed. But here, I want you to see, this is that gesture of empathy or solidarity. This is Elihu speaking to Job. You say, I am clean without transgression. I am pure and there's no iniquity in me. Look, he finds occasions against me. He counts me as his enemy, he being God. He puts my feet in the stocks and watches all my paths. Now that is in fact pretty much one of the things that Job has been saying. So this is Elihu saying, I hear you. I understand your argument. But then Elihu picks up in his own voice, but in this you are not right. I will answer you. God is greater than any mortal. Why do you contend against him, saying, he will answer none of my words? And then in that same chapter, he says, look, in fact, God is answering you. God's just answering you in ways that you can't hear right now. So he says, this is Elihu speaking again, for God speaks in one and in 2 ways, though people do not perceive it. God indeed does all these things. Here are the ways that he speaks to people. He gives them terrible dreams. He afflicts them in various ways. 2, 3 times with mortals, to bring back their souls from the pit, so that they may see the light of life. Pay heed, Job. Listen to me. Be silent, and I will speak. Now again, that's reprising a theme that the Friends introduced much earlier, through all 3 speech cycles, that there's still time for you to repent, Job. That if you turn to God, you will be restored. And he's saying, just as the Friends did, look, God speaks in a lot of ways, through afflictions, through terrible dreams, and this is God's way of really calling you back. So don't say God hasn't spoken to you. God has. And then he turns to what I think are the Friends in chapter 34. He says, this is what you guys should have said. Now, in a way, they did say it, but he says it more succinctly. He says it, far be it from God that he should do wickedness, and from the Almighty that he should do wrong. For according to their deeds, he will repay them, human beings. God will repay human beings. And according to their ways, he will make it befall them. Got a question? Okay. Well, okay. Now, see, this is an interesting point. The last half of that, according to their deeds, he will repay them, is what the Friends have been saying. And Job has been disagreeing. Remember at the end of chapter 21, Job said, as far as I can see, there is no justice in this world. But it is interesting that at the beginning of that little passage, and these are all direct pulls, I just cut and paste it, he puts more of a theological point on it when he says, not only does God, even if there's a slight delay, do justice, reward the just, punish the wicked, but God can never do wrong. And that is a slightly different way of casting the friend's point. And actually a way of theologically that continues to be quite influential. That one thing you cannot say about God is that God does evil. Okay? All right.